My name is John Lande, and I now live in Columbia, Missouri. I'm a professor at the Law School of University of Missouri. We have an LLM program in dispute resolution, a Master of Laws program. I'm the director of that program. I've been there since 2000, and I've been interested in dispute resolution in lots of ways for all my career. I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, and very motivated by seeing how people made personal sacrifices to try and make the world a better place. And so I guess when I went to college, that was sort of in the back of my mind. Ralph Nader was a very different character than he is now in the public perception. He was, and the whole public interest law movement was something that was very appealing to me. And so sort of doing things for social progress broadly defined were things that I was interested in. One of the things that really affected me was I took a course when I was an undergraduate in sociology of law, and it was taught by a guy named Joe Sanders, who has both a law degree and a PhD in sociology, and is the best course I've ever taken. He incorporated both his legal practice experience, his empirical, his social science knowledge, and then just sort of general doctrinal knowledge about law. And it was just a wonderful thing that gave me a much more three-dimensional picture of law than I had had, and a more realistic understanding of how the legal process worked. We read two classic books in that course which really affected me. One was called Settled Out of Court, which was a qualitative study about how automobile insurance adjusters actually settle claims. And what was fascinating to me was that it really had, it was related to but quite distinct from what the legal rules are. So lawyers would know that there are certain elements that you have to prove negligence. And the legal claims adjusters and the lawyers who dealt with them were not so much interested in that. They developed their own sort of illegal rules of thumb about how they were going to be handling cases. And I thought that was kind of interesting to see how things really work. There was another book we read called Justice Without Trial. In a similar sort of empirical study, they had a researcher, Jerome Skolnick, rode around, did ride-alongs with police, and he just observed police with their interactions with the people they encountered. And so having that kind of sense of realism and understanding how the world really worked was one of the things that influenced me. And then actually another thing that influenced me was Daniel Ellsberg. Again, sort of the politics of the time affected me. And I was, at the time, there were all these demonstrations against the war and against the draft and demonstrations about all sorts of other things. And what I found particularly persuasive about Ellsberg was that he was someone who was in the body, in the belly of the Defense Department. He was a true believer in terms of the war. And then as he learned how the Vietnam War was planned and developed, he changed his views, and he seemed to be a lot more credible to me, that he had a good solid base of understanding of knowledge. And so those were things that influenced me, and eventually I went to law school, didn't plan to practice. I thought it was too adversarial, but I thought that this would be an entree into politics and policy work, and I thought I might get involved in working for a state legislature or for a government or something, or a nonprofit organization. As I went through law school, two things. One is it reaffirmed that it was a lot more adversarial than my personal comfort was. And then also, I determined that law school is not very good at training lawyers. We understand a lot about legal rules, but there's very little practice. And I knew that I was incompetent. And I thought about the model of training doctors. And they have 2 years of internship, and you wouldn't, think about going to a doctor who hadn't had a lot of clinical experience, and yet we put out lawyers all the time who have, little to none. So I decided I was going to create my own internship. I was going to work for various lawyers for a while, and I did. I did some contract work for a variety of lawyers as another form of data collection. Part of my identity is as a social scientist, and so I'm, all the world is data for me in some ways. I worked with a number of different lawyers to kind of get a feel for the different styles and how they handle things, and I ended up working for one lawyer for a while who represented, from my perspective, the worst of the adversarial system. He treated clients really badly. He it just was not really getting to the heart and the merits. It just cost a lot. It was not a very productive process. And I had a horrible negotiation. I was working for him on an hourly basis, and he wanted me to be an associate, so I'd be salaried, which in some ways might have been appealing, but I wanted to have more control, and he wanted to have more control. We had horrible negotiations, at the end of which I realized that I needed to get out of working for him, and so over a period of time I saved up some money and decided I was going to do something else, and eventually, 1982 in May or so, Gary Friedman was on a panel of the Bar Association of San Francisco talking about mediation, which of course in 1982 was a very early stage, and I thought, wow, this is really speaks to me, and this is kind of who I am. Took several trainings with Gary, which was just wonderful. One of the things that I remember, he does so many great things in the trainings, or at least way back when. I assume he does some of them still. He had, at the end of the first training, he had us draw 2 pictures of images of us before and after the training. And before the training, I had a picture of myself as like a knight in armor, and it was very heavy and awkward and clumsy, and I couldn't really move around very well. And then afterward, I had myself in this kind of spandex bodysuit where it was very light and flexible, and I could really be myself. And so mediation really spoke to me, and I did that for a while. I started my own practice so I could do it. I opened a small practice in Oakland. Basically anything that would come through the door, mostly turned out to be family, some representation, some mediation, a variety of other things. Took every training I could, got involved in the mediation world, and actually at the time became, as well connected and well networked with a lot of folks, helped involved with organizing the Northern California Council for Mediation, which then became NCMA, which then became part of, I don't know, maybe it still is NCMA. Anyway, so organizations there, a group called Speaking for Mediation to publicize mediation. I had in the back of my mind the sociology of law experience from my undergraduate life, and one of the things that I had done, after I graduated from college, I did a little guided visioning for myself. I imagined that I was on my deathbed in my 80s, and I was trying to think back what my life would be like. And so I used that as a way to think about the different things that I would want to do. This was in 1974, and one of them was to be an academic, to teach and write about things that I cared about and things that I had practice experience with. And the fact is that I have lived out, I mean, it's remarkable how prescient I was in terms of the sorts of things that I might like to do and that I might do. So I decided I was going to need to go to, I wanted to go to grad school, went to Wisconsin to get a PhD in sociology, did a number of, my master's thesis was about how employees or employers handle discrimination complaints within their organizations. My doctoral dissertation was about the attitudes of business lawyers and executives about litigation and ADR. And then I went and taught for several schools. I taught at Nova Southeastern University for a couple of years in South Florida, which was fascinating to learn about the mediation culture there. Made lots of interesting connections. Then got a job at University of Arkansas at Little Rock from '97 to 2000, where I directed a child protection mediation program. Quite a learning experience, both in terms of child protection, and it really related to an area that the dispute resolution field that I'm particularly concerned about, dispute system design, because by definition a child protection mediation program is one where you have to engage a range of stakeholders to design and maintain the program. And then since 2000 I've been the director of the LLM program in dispute resolution in Missouri. So I've had a long checkered career, and that is a relatively short version of it.